running. I'm 80 years old, I'm still running. But anyway, I was at a very young age when I decided to hitchhike to Alabama. And the last people that picked me up dropped me off in downtown Chicago. And I started asking people if they were looking for a job, where would they go? They told me to go directly west on Central Avenue, get to Kedzie Avenue, turn south, which would have been left, and I started going into factories asking for a job. Well, I got to Nabisco, and the personnel guy gave myself and 6 or 7 other guys a tour of the bakery. They employed 7,000 people there. And so, one of the things he said, you fellas feel free to eat all the cookies you want. Well, then I knew I was going to eat until I got a paycheck coming in. And I ended up working at Nabisco for approximately 6 years. And they're in Chicago, and I decided I'd go in the military because I knew I needed an education. So every branch of the service turned me down at least once. And so I quit Nabisco, got in my car and went to Mobile, Alabama. And when I got there, I started looking for a job. I got a job at a service station. They didn't call them convenience stores in those days. They called them service stations because they would clean your windshield, check your air and your tires, fill it up with gas, check your oil, whatever. And of course you weren't making that much money at all. And this fella that would come in there every day, he had a new Ford pickup truck. And one day when he came in, he said, "Son, I like the way you hustle. I'm an electrical contractor. And maybe if you went to work with me, worked 3 years as an apprentice electrician, at the end of 3 years, you'd be a journeyman, just like me." And I asked him, I said, "Well, sir, what would my pay be starting out?" He said, "Well, I can't afford to pay you a lot because you're inexperienced. But," he said, "I guess I can start you off at $2.45 an hour." Well, I've been working at Nabisco all those years in Chicago, and every year the union would get us a 2-cent an hour raise. So I think when I left Nabisco, I was making like $1.98, started off around $1.80. And When he said $2.45 an hour, I was thrilled. So I went to work for him. I had myself a small apartment, and so one night someone knocked on my door. I went to the door and there was two guys standing there in suits and ties, and one of them said, "We're looking for Mr. George H. Wood." I said, "Well, that's me." The other pulled out an envelope out of his coat pocket and handed it to me. Said, "Now, Mr. Wood, we know you have it. They've been trying to draft me, the Army had, for 6 months, but they didn't know where I was at. When I got to Mobile, Alabama, I didn't report to the draft board because I figured if they wouldn't let you join, they're not going to draft you." Well, I was wrong on that point. So I got the draft notice, opened it up, had a letter in there that said, "Greetings from the President of the United States to Mr. George H. Wood. You've been selected by your friends, neighbors, and relatives to serve proudly in the United States Army." And along with that letter, there was a bus ticket going from Mobile to Montgomery, Alabama. There was a meal ticket. So, on the day that I was supposed to report, I left Mobile on that bus. And they were drafting kids, and they was taking so many in, nobody knew it, but they were building up for Vietnam. This was in 1964. So they had everything down on the railroad tracks. We slept in warehouses. They had a trailer that served as the mess, which is food. The Army called it chow. And I was there for approximately 3 days. And they assigned you a number when you first got there. My number was number 47. And suddenly the parking lot filled up with buses. And they came over the loudspeakers and said that when your number is called, along with it, you'll get a number of a bus in the parking lot. So go and get on the bus. So when I got on the bus, the driver was already sitting there in the driver's seat. I asked him, I said, "Sir, where are we going?" He said, "Next stop, Fort Polk, Louisiana." I said, "Sir, what does that mean?" He said, "Son, if you haven't figured it out yet, you're in the Army." So we went to the reception station at Fort Polk, and we took tests for about 3 days. And then they loaded us up on cattle trucks and took us to our basic training outfit. And when we come off those 18-wheelers, there were nothing more than flatbeds with 4 rows of seats. You had to put your duffel bag on top of your head So I'm sure it looked like a load of duffel bags coming down the road. But when we got off those trucks, we had this one black kid. It was real hot. And this one black kid went over and laid down on the grass. This little staff sergeant, although we didn't know what he was at the time, he went running over to that black kid, started kicking him, got him up on his feet, took his fist and knocked him down. That lasted for about a minute and a half. He beat the devil out of that black kid. Black kid was actually crying. And he said it loud enough as he was helping that kid straighten up his uniform. In the future, you pass out around here, you don't pass out on your ass, you pass out on your face. Well, that was to impress all of us, him beating up that kid. And now that I ended up staying in 10.5 years, I realized that staff sergeant who did that wasn't even mad at the kid. He was just doing that for show. And to impress everybody what they better do if they want to get along there. So, we'd been in basic training for 5 weeks. When the commander called me in, said he had good news for me. That I was going to be out of the Army in 3 days. Well, I guess I looked totally dejected because I'd say 95% of us in that basic training outfit were draftees. And 95% of them didn't want to be there. Well, I wanted to be there. So that company commander saw that I really wanted to, stay. He told me there wasn't anything he could do for me, but he called me back the next morning and told me that he sent for my 201 file, and he said, "Son, do you recall all the tests that you took at the reception station a few weeks ago?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." He said, "In all categories, you were number 1 on the test, with the exception of 1, and you came out number 2 on it." He said, "I tell you what, before they kick you out, they'll kick me out. You forget we've had this conversation." Well, I'm happy again.
You never told them why they might kick you out.
Lack of education. I thought everybody understood that. But you're right. So, the Army was putting me out because of lack of education. Everything hinged on education. But when they gave all of us that battery of tests, had one smart guy, and that was the commander of the basic training outfit. Well, I already had orders to go to cook school, Fort Hood, Texas. And so about a week after the commander talked to me, I got a cancellation of cook school in Texas, going to computer school, Redstone Arsenal, Alabama. So I said to my platoon sergeant, his name was Sergeant Gorleski, he was a World War II vet. He was from Wisconsin. And I told him I felt totally intimidated going to that computer school because of lack of education. He said, son, let me tell you something. You try half as hard there as you've tried here, you'll be in good hands. Don't worry about it. So I went ahead and went to the Redstone, went to computer school, missile school at the same time. So it was the Pershing missile system, and I remained in it the entire time I was in the service. I served in Germany with it twice, 2-year tours, but one tour I served 3 years. Where's those keys?